Hello, everybody. Welcome to Moment of Clarity. The New York Times has admitted Ukraine's got a wee bit of a Nazi problem, which is hilarious because it's been over a year of this proxy war going on, and here we are at this point where the New York Times and probably other media outlets as well are finally like, oh, you mean those Nazis? We've been talking about it for a year, well over a year, and the New York Times just now noticing, just now admitting it. I'm going to be getting to that story and many others. Please hit subscribe. I'm also going to be talking more about this is Seymour Hersh's reporting from the Durham Report, what the Durham Report leaves out in terms of Russiagate being a complete laughable fraud, which, again, I was right about for years, and now we have most people admitting it. Most people that have any sort of sanity are admitting it. So I'm going to get to that from Seymour Hersh. Also, I have some bad news on American life expectancy. I got a bunch of stories coming up for you. Please hit subscribe. Please hit thumbs up. Even if you are following or subscribed on Rumble or YouTube, please right now, make sure you also click the bell icon, because even if you are already subscribed, unless you click that bell icon, they will not generally alert you. I don't know exactly how it works on Rumble, but please click the bell or else the subscription doesn't really mean much. So please do that right now. All right. Well, I want to get to these stories, but before I show you exactly what the New York Times said, let me remind you the garbage we've been hearing from places like the New York Times, from places like the New York Times, but like CNN. And I think I'll just show you a little clip from CNN. This is the type of stuff that we've been hearing for over a year from these mainstream media outlets in terms of the proxy war in Ukraine. Let's just hear a minute or two of this.
We are talking about preventing neo-Nazis and those promoting genocide from ruling this country.
The false accusations.
So that was them translating, obviously, Lavrov, the Russian diplomat. But anyway, let's continue with the CNN clip. So Lavrov said we're trying to stop Nazis, among other things, in Russia's war against Ukraine, which is a proxy war. That's what he said. And here's CNN's analysis.
Country.
The false accusations of Nazism and genocide from Putin and his aides against.
So CNN's very clear there. False accusations of any Nazism in Ukraine, in the Ukraine military. Oh, completely false. There's no truth to that, huh? Is that right, CNN? No truth. No, not just a little bit. Not just a little. Nope.
Against the Zelensky government have drawn outrage. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum issuing a statement condemning that language as well as the invasion itself.
It's particularly perverse.
I love that you have the U.S. Holocaust Museum, which should be like one of the top people who's like, let's stop Nazis and Nazism. And instead, they're going along with the U.S. propaganda that there's no Nazism in Ukraine or on the Ukraine front lines. Or how about the 15,000 people that were killed in the Donbass region over the past many years, even before the Russian invasion began? They were killed mainly by Nazis. So any of that? No, not registering.
First, and denigrates and misappropriates the whole notion of the Holocaust to talk about the current democratic elected government somehow committing a genocide against Russian speakers.
Why has Putin invoked Nazism? Some observers say Putin is well aware that their fight against the Nazis and fascism in World War II strikes an emotional chord with Russians.
So that's the key to the CNN claim, is why would Putin invoke Nazism? It can't be based on any real Nazism, right? It can't. Now, there is an argument to be made, and you could sit here and have a legitimate argument as to whether the fact that there are Nazis in the Ukrainian military who hold a lot of sway in the Ukrainian military and in the Ukrainian government, there's an argument to be had as to whether that should matter, or whether, oh, well, it's not enough Nazis to really sway things. Or you could have an argument about, like, well, Russia still shouldn't have invaded Ukraine, whether there's Nazis or not. Fine, you could have those debates. That's not what this is. This is CNN telling you and everyone there is not a single Nazi in the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian government, and Russia made it up. And the reason Russia made it up is because they just want to strike that emotional chord with Russians about Nazism. Okay, so we've had to deal with that kind of garbage propaganda for a year and a half from mainstream outlets, including New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, as we just saw, etc. Well, here is New York Times today. Nazi symbols on Ukraine's front lines highlight thorny issues of history. Oh, they have Nazi symbols on Ukraine's front lines. It's interesting you admit that in New York Times, because I feel like we've seen over a year of no Nazis. What Nazis? I've never seen any Nazis. I do not see any Nazis. They then continue. Troops' use of patches bearing Nazi emblems risks fueling Russian propaganda. The mental gymnastics you have to do to justify Nazi patches on Ukrainian military, as the real problem with them is not that these assholes are Nazis. The real problem with it is that it kind of helps Russian propaganda. Imagine writing that headline. Imagine being you bought into your own propaganda to such a level that rather than say, hey, it is a problem that there's Nazis in Ukraine's military, rather than saying that, they're like, the problem with these folks wearing Nazi patches, not having any Nazi belief system. No, not at all. They just like the patches. They just like the color scheme and the design. It's just like a cool, it's got a skull in it. Hey, it's just, they have none of the belief system of Nazis. They just like the look. It's cool. Look at that. It's got a and I like the way that swastika has those curves in it, right? That's fun. What are you talking about? What are you, out of your minds? So the problem is that it fuels Russia propaganda, that's what they say, and spreading imagery that the West has spent a half century trying to eliminate. That's the real problem. This is like if someone told you, someone had like a patch of, fucking John Wayne Gacy or Jeffrey Dahmer or some shit on their chest. They had a T-shirt on that was just like Ted Bundy, with a high five, and you were like, the problem is not that you endorse everything Ted Bundy did, or that you like Jeffrey Dahmer as a person. That's not the problem. The problem is the emblem is just. It doesn't, it's not, I'm not down with the emblem. I'm fine with the whole belief system. I'm fine with you celebrating the murder of many people. I just don't like, could you change the T-shirt, perhaps? Do you have anything else, different color scheme? So then they show a photo, an image of a Ukrainian soldier wearing a Nazi patch with Nazi iconography. And so they talk about those photos, and they say, in each photograph, Ukrainians in uniform wore patches. So these are photographs that showed up and then were deleted from media feeds by sources like NATO, AP, etc. They basically posted these photos of Ukrainian military and then go, oops, there were Nazi emblems there. And then they try and purge the photos from the internet. And then eagle-eyed people go, I wonder why they're deleting these photos from the internets. Ukrainians in uniform wore patches featuring symbols that were made notorious by Nazi Germany and have since become part of the iconography of far-right hate groups. The photographs and their deletions highlight the Ukrainian military's complicated relationship. Could you imagine anywhere else in the world where you would where you are sitting there trying to justify fucking Nazis as they just have a complicated relationship. It's like, what? I mean, honestly, if someone were to tell you 10 years ago, hey, the New York Times will soon be justifying the wearing of Nazi emblems as a complicated relationship. I don't, even as much as I hate and find the New York Times to be a pathetic propaganda rag, I would still be like, no, they won't. They're not that dumb. Complicated relationship. Ukraine has worked for years through legislation and military restructuring to contain a fringe far-right movement. That's right. It's just a tiny number of individuals. However, and I had interviews with people like Scott Ritter, who know these topics far better than I do, who have said similar things, that even if the number of full-on Nazis in the actual Ukrainian military is, let's say, a small percentage, let's say even as small as 10%, the problem is they are the most aggressive and the most willing to kill for their ideology. So when they tell a politician or something in Ukraine, hey, if you do A, B, or C, such as walk to a peace table, we will murder you, it's believed as, oh, shit, they mean it, which gives them a lot of sway, right? They are the most violent, and it makes them, in many ways, the most powerful. So you don't need to have a lot in the Ukrainian military for them to essentially control the Ukrainian military. So that's the thing, is it could be a small group, and it can be a very powerful group. Fringe far-right movement whose members proudly wear symbols steeped in Nazi history and espouse views hostile to leftist LGBTQ movements and ethnic minorities. Oh, you mean like Nazi beliefs? Is that the kind of beliefs you mean? But some members of these groups have been fighting Russia since the Kremlin illegally annexed part of Crimea, part of the Crimea region of Ukraine in 2014, and are now part of the broader military structure. Some are regarded as national heroes. Oh, so you're admitting that not only are there Nazis, many of them apparently, in Ukrainian military, and that they've been very pivotal and long-term fighters in the Ukrainian military, but many of them are viewed as national heroes. And this article also tries to make you believe that, this is just something that bubbled up in the last 10 years. It's like, no, they worship, and it's not just the iconography. It's not just they like have a Nazi patch and they found the skull to be cool looking. They worship Stefan Bandera, a Nazi collaborator. That, like, it is the entire ideology. PBS did an interview with the mayor of one of the Ukrainian cities, and they blurred out the portrait that was hanging on the wall behind him. And people quickly figured out, hey, I wonder why they're blurring out that portrait that's behind this mayor of Ukraine. And it was a fawning interview about what a wonderful job he's doing fighting Russia, etc. Well, it turned out they blurred it out because it was Stefan Bandera. It was a photo of a Nazi collaborator that is celebrated in Ukraine. The iconography of these groups, including a skull and crossbone patch worn by concentration camp guards. I wonder if it's just because they like the skull and crossbone. There's other forms of skull and crossbones. You could have worn Blackbeard's fucking flag. You didn't have to use the Nazi guard flag. And a symbol known as the Black Sun now appears with some regularity on the uniforms of soldiers fighting on the front line. The New York Times is admitting what many of us have said for over a year. They are admitting many soldiers, many are connected to Nazism and proud of it, including soldiers who say the imagery symbolizes Ukrainian sovereignty and pride, not Nazism. No, there's no other way to look. I have had the same problem. There's no other way to show your sovereignty and pride other than to wear Nazi stuff. Even as someone who's raised Jewish and atheist by choice, I still the only way to show my sovereignty and pride is my varied assortment of swastika tattoos that I'm not going to show them right now, but I like to try different varieties, and it's the only way to show your pride, It really is. I don't know if you guys have, let me know in the chat if you think the same. It's wearing Nazi symbols is just the only way to really be proud of yourself. It's the only way. In the short term, that threatens to reinforce Mr. Putin's propaganda. So I love the idea of like in half of this article, they're like, so totally true. There's kind of Nazis like all throughout the Ukrainian military. You kind of can see the emblems on like a lot of their stuff. But the real problem with that is not that they're Nazis. That's not the problem, that they're Nazis. The problem is that it helps Putin's propaganda. That's the real problem. That's the real problem. And then, of course, they have to throw in there. So Putin has said that Ukraine needs to be denazified, a position that ignores the fact that Ukraine's president Zelensky is Jewish. We always use that as a shield. You can't have Nazis in the military. There's photos of Zelensky with his 4 main guards that like stand around him at all times. And even they, or at least one of them, has Nazi iconography on his uniform. Like Zelensky's main guards. I love the like, oh, well, it can't be because Zelensky's Jewish. That bullshit argument. It's kind of like, well, Obama can't possibly bomb thousands of non-white people, black and brown people, because he's black. He never could have. Oh, really? Then how did he drop 26,000 bombs in 1 year during his presidency? Well, those were the good kind of bombs that only hit the white people. I don't know. It doesn't. Look, you find a representative who can give cover to the fact that your military is largely controlled by Nazis. Perfect. Who better to put in as your puppet president than someone where you can go, but he's Jewish? A lot of people will do a lot of things depending on the circumstances, okay? Let's not remember that many guards at concentration camps were Jews who were treated differently so that they could, they basically had decided, well, by being a guard, I can guarantee my safety. I can guarantee I won't be treated the worst. I can guarantee that I'll get food and I won't be tortured. And so you had many examples of, and fucking horrible circumstances all around. But if you walked up to a concentration camp and there was a Jewish guard there, where you go, well, this can't be a concentration camp. There's a Jewish guard here. Or you're not even a guard. He's just a fella. He's just a receptionist. He's just a Jewish receptionist who is at this concentration working place that they have for the peoples. Here's a quote from a researcher at the investigative group Bellingcat. So for those of you who don't know, Bellingcat is essentially a CIA cutout. The CIA, spawns these various groups, entities that are meant to do things that they don't want their name on. So Bellingcat is a investigative group that just happens to seemingly prove anything U.S. propaganda needs to prove. Bellingcat goes, we investigated and it's totally true. Whatever U.S. propaganda said. And so they're not quoting Bellingcat on this issue because, who do you want to quote more but CIA's investigative group? What worries me in the Ukrainian context, he says, is that people in Ukraine who are in leadership positions, either they don't or they're not willing to acknowledge and understand how these symbols are viewed outside Ukraine. Yeah. That's right. That's right. The problem is the Ukrainian officials just don't know that Nazism ain't cool around a lot of the world. Someone should have told these Ukrainian officials that Nazism is just kind of frowned upon. Of course they know. They live in a region where Nazis, like the OG Nazis, the first Nazis, fucking exterminated people. Of course they know what the emblems mean and what Nazism means. That's some of the dumbest garbage. We've tried several times to explain to these Ukrainian officials that other folks around the world are just not. Like, they think that when you have on a swastika, it has something to do with Hitler. It's not just a cross doing cartwheels. So they just don't. We can't quite get through. They think that skull and crossbones Nazi guard patch is just like a really cool pirate thing, and we're just trying to explain it to them. I think, to continue the quote from Bellingcat, I think Ukrainians need to increasingly realize that these images undermine support for the country. Oh, God. If you're at the New York Times, how do you read something like this and not just start weeping at like whatever your life has become? Like what am I? I'm writing. And for those of you who need a little bit of history about the New York Times, the New York Times has a Jewish owner publisher, and it's a family. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but family that's essentially owned it, been the publisher for years. And during World War II, it was the same Jewish family that was the New York Times publisher. However, that publisher was very adamant that the Holocaust basically not be covered in the New York Times, even as it was being revealed. Yes, there was an initial period where people didn't quite believe that it could be happening or happening at quite those levels. Doesn't mean the U.S. intelligence didn't know it was happening, but I mean your average person. But then it became very open, and it was reported on by other outlets. And yet New York Times had something like, through the entirety of World War II, had something like 6 articles on the Holocaust, and two of them even mentioned one of their largest ones. I think it was 8,000 words on the Holocaust and the camps being liberated and everything. Never had the word Jew in it. Never said who these victims were in the Holocaust. This is a Jewish publisher of one of the largest paper in the world in many regards. And they did not want to talk about Jews in the Holocaust, about concentration camps. And prior to World War II, they were very supportive, or they basically ran cover for Hitler. There were many articles in the New York Times leading to World War II where Hitler was talked about as either a great politician, a wonderful, great politician, such as the 1936 Berlin Olympics, where the article was like, it was the best Olympics ever, and everyone's leaving here realizing that Adolf Hitler is one of the best leaders in the world. And there was an article like that, despite the fact that it was already clear what Nazis stood for in 1936. There were already laws in Germany stripping citizenship from Jews. It was already quite clear what was going on, and yet you had New York Times running around doing that kind of coverage. And you can come to your own conclusion as to why this Jewish publisher wanted to do that. Part of it clearly is that it's kind of like he wanted to be accepted in the ruling elite class. And obviously at that time, it was harder to be accepted even in the US as a Jewish person in the ruling elite. And so maybe he didn't want to become known as the Jewish outlet. So therefore, he actually ran in the opposite direction of never revealing the truth about the Holocaust, or minimally. So it seems like New York Times keeps going down that path. But here, after over a year of this garbage, me and many others, not in the mainstream media, right? Me and many others in independent media have been proven right. And New York Times admitting that Nazism is prevalent in the Ukrainian military. Okay, so I wanted to move on to another story, but still Russia related. This is going to be a heavy Russia episode. And well, first we'll start with this one. The The Russian spy whale is back. That's right. In case you were worried there wasn't enough anti-Russia propaganda out there, and just to be clear, if I need to keep repeating it, I'm anti-war. I do not support the Russian invasion, but I'm also anti-proxy war, and I'm anti the U.S.-backed coup that we created in Ukraine in order to install a puppet president so that we could have a NATO-allied country receiving NATO funding and training and arms on the border of Russia. That's generally how you set off a powder keg. And I'm opposed to all that as well. But here's the latest propaganda against Russia. Russian spy whale is back. That's right. A whale that Russia created. An alleged Russian spy whale is now in Sweden. And most of the article says that he's in danger. The whale is in danger. A beluga whale, long believed to be a Russian spy, has surfaced in Sweden, fueling concerns about his well-being and efforts to protect him from dangerous boat traffic. Hvaldimir, a combination of the Norwegian word for whale, Hval, and Russian President Vladimir Putin's first name, so they call the whale Hvaldimir, even though I think you guys can surmise that perhaps this is not a Russian spy whale. Perhaps that there's no such thing as a Russian spy whale. Now, if you just off the top of your head, if you were to think you were Russia, you wanted to train a whale to be a spy for you, you spent a lot of time training this whale to go and find out stuff and then come back and report back. Or whatever. Oh, that's a dolphin. Anyway, however a whale would report back. So you spend all this time training this whale to be a spy for Russia and go and find out what Sweden and Norway are up to, because, you really need that. What would you put on the whale? I want to. Do you think would you write your name on the whale? Would you write "From Russia with Love" if it's a spy whale? Or would you maybe not do any of that? Would you maybe try and make sure that no one knew it was a Russian spy whale? Well, if there were such a thing. Well, folks, the whale Vladimir had been wearing a harness labeled Equipment of St. Petersburg. Because, those sneaky Russians, when they create a spy whale, they write their name all over it. They actually stuck a Russian flag in the blowhole so that when it swims, the Russian flag just flutters down the bay. What the fuck? This is the dumbest propaganda. This is how sad our propaganda has become. Russia has a spy whale, and they wrote their name all over it. They just wrote, "This is totally Russian." You notice anytime we do this ridiculous propaganda against Russia, the Russians always write their name all over the things, whatever it is that they're supposedly doing. In this case, spy whale. In other cases, like where they keep trying to poison people but always fail, they always try and poison them with the same chemical, Novichok, the Russian-named chemical. They don't shoot them with a gun so that everyone could go, well, we don't know whose gun it was. They don't poison them with a chemical that doesn't have a Russian name, like arsenic or something. They always poison them with Novichok so that when people go, well, what was he poisoned with? They go, well, we figured it out. It's Russian spy chemical, Russian poison chemical. They always try and kill them with the exact thing that points back to Russia immediately. Isn't that interesting? Bellingcat will tell you all about that. Bellingcat has worked very hard to justify that Russia always tries to poison people with Novichok. And also, you might notice they always seem to fail. They always seem to fail. The Skripal poisoning, the Navalny poisoning. For some odd reason, Russia just cannot actually kill anyone with poison. And you'd think, after all the attempts, they might move to like guns. You would think at some point, because let's face it, the only reason to actually use a poison on someone and not a gun would be because you're afraid a gun would be too traceable, right? You want it to be a mystery as to what the person died. That's really the only reason. Because you don't want to walk up to them and go, "Hey, I got a gun. You're gonna die." Want to keep it a secret. So Russia has decided to keep all of their poisoning as a secret by using the one thing that always points back to Russia. Makes perfect sense to me. Makes perfect sense. So this whale, who was swimming around with a harness that said "Equipment of St. Petersburg," I love it. And it had a phone. If found, please call Vladimir Putin. If found, please send back via regular post. Please send this whale back to us via regular post. Here's our address at the Kremlin. Please send beluga whale back. Russia and the U.S. are among the handful of countries that have military training programs incorporating aquatic animals. I think the U.S. tried to use seals once for blowing up mines or something. Vladimir has been something of a local celebrity in recent years, with viral videos showing him picking up a woman's dropped cell phone and stealing a GoPro. One whale, I love how this is phrased. It says, one whale said Monday that it's working with the Swedish authorities. And I'm like, they interviewed a whale for this story? Apparently One Whale is the name of an organization, not a whale. One whale we talked to said, I don't know him. He's always around here, always speaking Russian. President Rich German told NPR in a phone interview that One Whale's short-term goal is to protect Vladimir, whose life is in clear danger. Well, especially if Russia ever gets a hold of him again, they're going to have to exterminate him because he is trying to leave the country, Their ultimate goal is to create a 500-acre marine reserve in northern Norway where they can rehabilitate him. But they also mentioned somewhere in the article that he's been swimming around Norway and Sweden for several years, and he's been hanging out mainly at like a shipping area or something. And I'm like, wow, that's one hell of a trained spy whale. Yeah, he just came down and he kind of hangs out with the fishermen a lot all day. What exactly is he doing for Russia? Oh, God. Can't we get back to good propaganda? Come on. Give us some real, solid, quality propaganda. This shit, man. All right, I want to get to Seymour Hersh's article on more on Russiagate, the Clinton connection, etc. Two things you can do for me real quick. No matter how you're subscribed or watching, please make sure you go and click the bell icon and check that you have clicked it. So even if you are subscribed already at Rumble or at YouTube, please, even though you're already subscribed, click the bell icon, because without that, you won't get notified of my videos. I do these every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. The other thing you do for me is join up at leecamp.net. There is a free level you can join up at. So for all of you, and I know it's thousands that are not joining up at leecamp.net because you don't want to pay the 38 cents an episode. I understand, tough times. Please go join up for free, and you'll get all the free stuff, and you won't get everything, but you'll get a lot of it. So please do that. Either now, open a separate window, go to leecamp.net, or go after the video. Mimi's asking, where's the bell icon? It's usually next to where you subscribe, or when you click subscribe. So, and if anyone in the comment section has more details about that, please feel free to help Mimi find the bell icon. But all right, let's get to Seymour Hersh's article about Russiagate's missing pieces. And this is really an important article because I've covered how spectacularly Russiagate has collapsed. It continues to collapse every day. Like, even when you think there's nothing left, you're like, there's nothing but shreds left in this thing. Somehow there's more to collapse. There's more to fall apart even after that. So the Durham report came out. Now, many people are saying, oh, well, Durham was picked by Trump, therefore it's all bullshit. But obviously, he put out a several hundred-page report on this, and much of it has sourcing, endless testimony from witnesses. So it doesn't really matter who selected him. There is loads of evidence that he brought forward. Now, I know that many Trump supporters, which I am not, in case you need a reminder of that, Trump is a racist, megalomaniacal corporate shill, but so is Biden. So there you go. He gets to choose between those two. But many who were Trump supporters were upset that the Durham report did not say, like, and Hillary Clinton should be arrested or whatever. So that's what we're going to get to some of that in a second. But I wanted to show you, I want to just remind you how hilarious the coverage was in the midst of Russiagate. So I thought I'd just show you one short clip of how spectacularly stupid this coverage was in the peak of Russiagate. And these people, these reporters, have not apologized, have not said, wow, we got it wrong, have not apologized to me, have not unshadow banned my stuff, or Chris Hedges, or Jesse Ventura, or any of those who have been attacked, alienated, sidelined, had our videos deleted, banned globally. There are no sorries. There are no apologies. They just go on their way. And in fact, all of these articles and all of these videos, well, most of them, I suppose some have been deleted. Most of them have been that justified Russiagate, said it was real, acted like it was real, acted like Russia manipulated our election. They rigged the election. All of those things still up online. They still act like those should be up there and we should keep talking about them and pretending they're real. So anyway, here is one short clip from Rachel Maddow, the beloved Rachel Maddow, who just, what a charming, truthful human being.
Embassy, quote, was withdrawn from Washington on short.
Okay, so I forgot I should give you a little bit of background real quick. She's talking about a Russian diplomat. She begins the thing by talking about the acting like the Russian embassy is some kind of dastardly building, horrifying. But, and then so she references the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier, many of you know, completely debunked. It was utterly false. It not a shred of truth in it. It is basically this guy Steele, Christopher Steele, was paid by the Democrats to make up a dossier that acted like Trump was a Russian agent. And so he did. He was like, hey, you got to give me the money? Here you go. So he made up all this shit. And here's Rachel Maddow covering it as if it's real. And let's recall that many of us, not just myself, there were hundreds, and many of us who were not right-wing knew this was bullshit back then as well. Or at the very least, were highly skeptical. So here she is discussing that.
Short notice, because Moscow feared his heavy involvement in the U.S. election operation, including the so-called veterans pensions ruse reported previously. His heavy involvement in the U.S. election operation would be exposed in the media. So
real quick, you'll notice what she's doing is she's The Steele dossier claims that this Russian diplomat no one's ever heard of was withdrawn from the U.S. because he was linked to the Russian election campaign, the Russian rigging of the elections, which she is acting like is completely true. Russia rigged our elections, right? She's pretending it's a real thing. It's not. It's all been debunked. It's all collapsed. The DNC wouldn't even show the servers to the FBI because they knew it wasn't a hack. And yet, here's Rachel Maddow pretending it's all true, right?
this senior Russian diplomat working at the Russian embassy, he gets taken out of the embassy. He gets withdrawn from the embassy in Washington. He gets recalled to Moscow, allegedly on account of him being exposable, him potentially being exposed for his role in the Russian operation against our presidential election. Okay, now that reference to the pension ruse reported previously, that's a reference to the alleged means by which the Russian government paid for this operation.
This is where it gets really good. She starts to talk about how Russia paid for the operation to rig our election, which was not real, and she made up, and they made up, and the media made up, and the Clinton machine made up. And she's talking about how did they pay for the thing we all made up? Great question, Rachel. How did the Russians pay for the thing you made up in your fairy tales? How did they pay for that?
Right? That did actually have to pay for it, right? It's about the way they got cash to pay hackers and other operatives to do the grunt labor of this Russian election attack. I mean, what we know of the Russian attack on our election, Russian efforts to try to elect Donald Trump president, it did not seem to be a super labor-intensive process. It wasn't like an industrial process, but you do need people to do the work. You do need, for example, people building and running the online bots and repeaters, right? That were, giving ginned up fake viral status to negative news and about Hillary Clinton and
She's talking about how they needed staff to do the thing that never existed. We also now know, it's been proven with the Twitter files, that the Twitter bot thing that Rachel and these other folks created did not exist. And yet, and I think some people, especially liberals, now say, oh, well, they didn't know at the time. Rachel thought this stuff did exist. But here's the thing. I was watching all the same news that Rachel Maddow was, and I knew it didn't exist. Many people did. Many people knew this was bullshit even then. Or at the minimum, they thought, well, it could be true. I'd have to see proof, which was exactly what I thought. Like, show me some fucking real proof, and then I'll go with you. I'll go with you on this thing. And just show me some proof. But they had none. They had nothing. They had this pretend Steele dossier, all this garbage, and they just kept spitting it out. And you kept sitting there going, do they have anything? Do they have anything? Do they have anything? I mean, I was covering it at the time and it saying, look, show us what it, I mean, even Facebook said, because one of the big things was the Facebook ads, right? Russia bought Facebook ads. Even Facebook said that 56% of those ads bought by this Russian clickbait farm appeared after the election. Well, boy, that does not sound like a very effective election rigging campaign. To spend 56% of your money after the election. That sounds like a really bad election rigging campaign. And that was available within a week of when they announced Facebook ads bullshit. Because the head of advertising at Facebook put that statement out within days. And of the whatever was left, 44%, I think, with the maths, of the 44% that did appear before the election, the average spent was $3 on those ads. Like each ad, $3. Now, anyone who knows anything about Facebook advertising, $3 gets you roughly one view by one guy who's looking the other direction. $3 gets you nothing. Like, Facebook will often try and get me to pay for things. They'll be like, hey, send us $400 and this thing could be seen by 100 more people. Or what you have to spend thousands of dollars to have a big impact on Facebook. And here they were being like, $3 an ad. I'm sure that'll do it. That'll rig the election. I mean, it's just...
And positive news about Donald Trump, right? So, I mean, you do actually have to involve some people, and you probably do have to pay some folks. So the allegation here from the dossier was that this guy working in a very senior position at the Russian embassy, he was basically the paymaster for this operation. And the allegation from the dossier is that he was withdrawn from the embassy, withdrawn from the Russian embassy in Washington, sent back to Moscow on short notice because the Russians were worried that he was going to be exposed.
I mean, the other thing is, this is the definition of a conspiracy theory, right? She's like, it's conspiring and swirling around, and it involves this guy and that guy. And this is the definition of a conspiracy theory. Yet, then she calls any of us who called her out conspiracy theorists. Max Blumenthal the other day confronted her at an event. It's not a great clip. He didn't get to speak long before security rushed him out. So otherwise I would have played it. But he basically just says, you never apologized for the Steele dossier. And she's on stage. She just goes, what? And then he gets dragged out and they go, And she then says, coming soon to a Substack near you. And the crowd laughs. You see, she's saying that guy's not a legit journalist and she's a legit journalist. Well, that's funny because he was asking you to apologize for the blatant lies you've told for years about this garbage. Okay, let's get to Seymour Hersh's article about this, about Russiagate. Russiagate's missing pieces, a moment in Durham's report where he hints at the real story. Russiagate was a fraud initiated by the Clinton campaign and abetted by political reporters in Washington and senior FBI officials who chose to look the other way. Durham writes, in late 2016, July 2016, U.S. intelligence agencies obtained insight into Russian intelligence analysis, alleging that U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton had approved a campaign plan to stir up a scandal against U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump by tying him to Putin and the Russians' hacking of the DNC. Do you follow that? Like, they have plenty of evidence showing that the Clinton campaign, the Clinton machine, Hillary Clinton herself, came up with this idea to tie Donald Trump to Russia. Like, made it up out of whole cloth and just said, this is what we'll do. We need to pin this election loss on someone. It'll be easy to pin it on Russia because everyone already hates Russia. We've already got a lot of propaganda against Russia. So we'll blame it on Russia. And I always have to remind people that actually for a few days after the election, after Hillary's loss, when the whole nation was like, what the fuck just happened? Even people that supported Trump were like, what the hell just happened? For those few days, right after the election, they actually didn't blame it on Russia. Do you remember this? They blamed it on the FBI. They blamed it on the FBI for reopening the case against Hillary Clinton. It was blamed on James Comey and the FBI. But then the Clinton campaign realized, you know, this FBI thing, in order to push that, we've got to go against the intelligence community. That doesn't go well. JFK. So let's pin it on someone that all of America will believe is dastardly and rigged this thing. Forget the FBI. Let's pin it on Russia. And so it switched, and all of a sudden, James Comey became a hero of the liberals. Remember that? To continue from the Durham Report, this intelligence, taken at face value, was arguably highly relevant. And, oh, sorry, this is someone else, Schmidt, actually saying this about the Durham Report, was highly relevant and exculpatory because it could be read in a fuller context and in combination with other facts to suggest that materials such as the Steele dossier reports and the Alpha Bank allegations. Another thing Rachel Maddow pushed all over the place was that Alpha Bank revealed some connection between Russia and Donald Trump, and Russia had funded Trump and all this bullshit. Were part of a political effort to smear a political opponent and to use the resources of the federal government's law enforcement and intelligence agencies in support of political objective. Durham goes on to cite instances of public statements. He finds evidence to suggest that, quote, at least some of the officials within the campaign were seeking information about the FBI's response to the DNC hack, which would be consistent with and a means of furthering the purported plan. Some in the campaign were trying to push the FBI to say that Russia was the source of the hack. We now know it was not a hack. It was a leak from the inside. You are welcome to surmise as to who that leak from the inside was. But either way, it was not a hack by a foreign government. It was a leak. He adds that the campaign's funding of the Steele reports and the Alpha, and the Alpha Bank allegations provide some additional support for the credibility of the information set forth in the Clinton plan intelligence. It became evident to some members of Durham's staff that the real story was not about whether or not Trump had pee parties in a Moscow hotel room. That was one of the things in the Steele dossier, one of the headline-producing allegations in the Steele dossier that consumed the Washington press corps in the aftermath of Trump's victory. The issue was whether the Clinton campaign, in its constant leaking of false accusations and false data, had crossed a line. You think? Some senior FBI officials had openly joined ranks with the Clinton campaign, with its drumbeat of spurious allegations, because in some cases of a shared belief in the importance of a Clinton victory in the fall election. As Durham himself writes, any attempted prosecution premised on the Clinton plan intelligence would face what in all likelihood would be insurmountable classification issues given the highly sensitive nature of the information itself. The issue with Durham may be that he was the wrong man in what could never be the right job. He had made his reputation with the help of others in the FBI and Justice Department. So basically, he was not going to turn against the FBI and the Justice Department. And so while he did reveal that the Clinton campaign came up with this plan to blame Russia, he didn't dig deeper. He didn't say any of them should be prosecuted. He didn't even say there should be any changes to the FBI, which is kind of unbelievable. You have this mass FBI investigation that he in his report says was unfounded. No changes needed. No changes necessary. Totally amazing. All right. I want to get to another story about life expectancy in the U.S. has been crashing down, and let's talk about why. But I also want to see if I can get to other stories as well. But all of that is at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp. The other platforms will be ending, so I hope you will jump on over to rumble.com/Lee Camp and join me there. And I also hope you will become a member at leecamp.net.